Hello, true crimerers. So this is going to be another compilation video. So earlier today I posted a missing and murdered Indigenous woman case. So I figured today would be the best time to post the compilation of the videos I've made on TikTok. So in my playlist over on TikTok called Cases of the Marginalized, I have 19 videos total with regards to MMIWs. There are a couple cases of men or families, so all of them are in this compilation video. So every video I've done is in here. And I just plan to continue that series over to my YouTube page. You'll probably, to those who don't understand why people tend to get frustrated about MMIW cases or Indigenous cases, you'll understand through watching these videos why. These are cases from Canada and the United States, but you'll see this consistent behavior with like police or federal agencies just not giving a shit. And the communities outside the reservations not giving a shit. So if you look up murdered and missing Indigenous women in the United States and you want to see full detailed stories, you are going to pull your hair out of frustration because you're not going to find a lot. And when researching a lot of these cases, I have a list of names to cover, but though there really isn't anything attached to those names in terms of like stories and investigations to even talk about. I think I even have a video or two in this compilation where I show you that. So without further ado, this is going to be 19 cases of murdered and missing Indigenous people, primarily women. That being said, viewer discretion is advised. In 2016, there were a reported 5,712 murdered and missing Indigenous women in this country. And by today, we seem to have lost count. Hello, true crimerers. We are going to start a new series talking about these women's cases, because it is now an invisible statistic and an epidemic. Pictured here was 20-year-old Ashley Loring Heavyrunner, and she lived on the Blackfeet Reservation, which is in Montana. The Blackfeet Reservation is about 1.5 million acres, and it's actually bigger than the state of Delaware. And unfortunately, there are many cases of MMIWs on this reservation. Ashley Loring Heavyrunner was last seen in June of 2017. Ashley loved photography. She also was known to be super athletic, loving, caring, always smiling, and just a huge positive influence. In June of 2017, Ashley's sister Kimberly had come home from a vacation to Morocco. There were plans to move into a new apartment so that Ashley could start anew. But Ashley never called Kimberly after she got home. In fact, she hadn't heard from her in days. Kimberly and other family members tried contacting her, but she never answered the phone. She never answered text messages. Now, there had been a time before when Ashley lost her cell phone or she went to go visit some family friends, but never contacted anyone about it, but she always got a hold of someone within a couple of days. But now we're talking much longer than that. Kimberly truly knew something was wrong when their father was diagnosed with liver failure, and Ashley has still never gotten hold of anyone. Kimberly went to Blackfeet law enforcement and to tribal law enforcement. They did a little modest 3-day search and then stopped. And they just stopped being helpful at that point. And it took the BIA, or the Bureau of Indian Affairs, 2 months to get involved. Kimberly was frustrated because no one was taking this seriously. So Kimberly did her own investigating. She reached out to all of Ashley's friends. They all said the last time they had any contact with her was June 5th of 2017. She was actually at a party that night and someone had released a video showing her at that party. That same night, Ashley had actually texted Kimberly asking her for some money, but she couldn't do it because she was in Morocco. Kimberly asked Ashley, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Yes." 2 weeks after Ashley went missing, they got a tip. Someone saw a young woman running down US Highway 89, which was on the Blackfeet Reservation, that night that she was last heard from. So they searched the area and they found a gray sweater. They turned that gray sweater into authorities, but they never investigated it. They never tested it. They threw it into a box and left it be, to see if maybe Ashley's DNA was on it. Kimberly found out that possibly the last person to see her alive was a man named Sam McDonald. He said he was partying with her for a few days. They found more clothing items on his property, but they've never released information on it. The FBI got involved 9 months after she disappeared, and they have no suspects. Hello, true crimerers. This is another murdered or missing Indigenous woman case, and the more I do of these, the more fucking angry I get. Viewer discretion is advised. Pictured here is Pepita Red Hair, and she lived on the Navajo reservation near Albuquerque, New Mexico. She was 27 years old at the time of this story. The date is March 25th, 2020. Now, I'm sure every person watching this is very familiar with that time frame because that is when the COVID pandemic really kind of took hold of the world. And the news was all about that. Pepita's mother, pictured here, she would drop Pepita off at her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Nick, at his house a little south of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And this is the house where he lived at that time. Now, after Pepita's mom had tried calling and texting her much later on in the day, she didn't hear anything back. And then the next day, still, she heard nothing. And then by March 27th, a couple of days later, the mom just reaches out to Nick, like, hey, have you seen her? And he just said, no, she left and I don't know where she is. Now, her mother tried to call to have her reported missing to the Albuquerque police, but they said, it's legal for adults to go out on their own, right? It's normal for adults to go, so just hold off. But her family knew something was wrong. This was unusual. And police had no desire to help them whatsoever. So the family made flyers with their own money. They posted flyers. They searched themselves. They never found any trace of her. It's important to note that the relationship Pepita had with Nick was bad. You see, there had been multiple domestic dispute calls regarding Nick and Pepita. She was actually admitted to the hospital once as an assault victim by Nick. Well, a month after Pepita went missing, Nick finally called police and he filed a missing persons report. He says that night they had an argument and she left the house on foot, and that she met up with another guy possibly named Laramie. Eventually, this Laramie person was tracked down, but they said they hadn't seen her since March 10th. Nothing Nick says seems to make much sense. Given his history of physical abuse towards her, you would think, well, maybe we should investigate him. Nope, they haven't. They haven't even called him a suspect. They still said, she's an adult who's just missing, it's fine. Her own family is searching the deserts to see if they could find her body. But still, nothing. If you do know anything, please call 505-242-2677. A 17-minute phone call would capture the voice of a kidnapper and a murderer. Hello, true crimerers. This is another murdered Indigenous woman case. Viewer discretion is advised. And yes, this is a redo. This was 20-year-old Amber Tukaro from Fort McMurray, Alberta. She was a member of the Mikisew Cree First Nation. And here she is with her 14-month-old son. On August 17th, 2010, Amber would fly into Edmonton, Canada, with her son and with a friend of hers. Their plan was to get a hotel outside of Edmonton because it was cheaper. So they were staying in a little town called Nisku. The three of them were supposed to be going into Edmonton the next day, but apparently Amber got a little too anxious and she wanted to go ahead of time. So she would hitchhike a ride on August 18th, 2010, around 8 o'clock that evening. Her friend, Evangeline, agreed to babysit her son, Jacob. Now, Amber hitched a ride with an unknown man, and she would never be seen again. She was reported missing fairly quickly, but the RCMP didn't take it seriously. They said, she's probably just out partying, she'll be back. In Canada, there is a disproportionately high amount of Indigenous women who go missing or are murdered. Aboriginal women make up 3% of the population, but also 10% of its murder victims. So the family was obviously just pissed when the RCMP wasn't taking this seriously. She was missing. On August 28th, the RCMP would actually close the case, saying there was a sighting of Amber, so she's been found. The RCMP didn't actually verify the information. The RCMP threw away all of Amber's belongings from the hotel. 2 years later, the investigation is reopened when police uncover a 17-minute phone call that was recorded from a phone call that Amber's brother made to her cell phone. He was incarcerated, so the call was recorded. Police released 61 seconds of that call. Here is a small clip of that.
You kidding me? You better not take me anywhere. I don't want to go. I want to go into the city. Yo, we're not going into the city, are we? No, we're not.
That would be the voice of Amber's kidnapper and, unfortunately, her murderer. Amber's body was eventually found in this exact spot on September 1st, 2012, and she was murdered. The RCMP destroyed this investigation. They didn't consider her missing. They didn't really look for her. They never questioned her travel companion, and now she can't be found. And now a young boy is growing up without a mother. You can hear the entire 60-second clip on YouTube. Do you recognize the voice? Hello, true crimerers. I am here to present another case of a murdered Indigenous woman. And this is the case of Anna Scott. Viewer discretion is advised. Anna was a 23-year-old mother, and she lived in the Reno, Nevada area. She was described as a ball of joy in that she had one goal in life, and that was to be the best mother. Anna's children meant absolutely everything to her. She was also a member of the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe, and she was very involved in the tribal community, and it was a very important aspect of her life. At 4 o'clock in the morning on February 3rd, 2022, just a few months ago, police were called with regards to a car that was on fire near the Galena Creek Bridge. In the trunk of the vehicle was the body of an unknown woman. Anna Scott's family would see this on the news, and they were concerned that that might have been her car. She had posted something on social media just the night before, and she was very involved on social media. So when Anna posted nothing on the following morning, the morning this was found, it made her family concerned. And then they see the car and they let police know, I think that might be her car. And sadly, they were correct. The body found in the trunk was confirmed to be that of Anna Scott. It was determined that she also had a gunshot wound to the head, which was her cause of death. She was then placed in the trunk. The car was then left on the side of the freeway and then set on fire. Police have released very, very few details with regards to where they are at in the investigation. According to Anna's family, one of her friends would tell them that they were with Anna the night before the car was found. But then that friend left and Anna was alone with a couple of people that they did not recognize. But then all of that's pretty vague, and there isn't much detail on that either. On 2002, a 23-year-old man by the name of Jacory Shaw was allegedly being sought for questioning about the Anna Scott case. Whatever his connection may have been, that's never been revealed. When police got to him, he fled on foot. He produced a concealed weapon, and it ended with him being shot in the chest by the cop and dying. He was wanted for felony gun charges, but in terms of his connection to Anna Scott, whether he was a suspect or not, they haven't said. Just that they wanted to question him about it. There were also rumors that Anna Scott's case had some relation to the recent Naomi Irion case, but that rumor has been dispelled and there is no connection. If you have any information about this case, please call the number I have up there. And yes, there is a reward if it leads to an arrest. Hello, true crimerers. This is another missing and murdered Indigenous woman case. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of information on this one, though. This is a fresh, current missing person from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. This is a story that's not getting any media attention because, of course, Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie have taken over the entire world in terms of true crime news. Now, I'm not saying that Gabby's story isn't important, of course it is. But there are other missing people out there. Sadly, we know where Gabby is because she has passed away. But what about 15-year-old Natalia Castaway? Have you heard about her? No, you probably haven't. She is 15 years old. She was last seen in Alcester, South Dakota, possibly with an adult man. No one has seen her since September 11th, 2021, just a few weeks ago. They believe she traveled to Sioux Falls with this adult man, who has not been named. She is also 5 months pregnant. So it's important that she is somewhere safe because she's pregnant and needs to be cared for. She does have a couple tattoos, one on her left hand that says family and one on her neck that has 1956 in Roman numerals. She is 5'4", 110 pounds with brown hair and brown eyes. Now, I don't know if this is the same person, but 2 years ago, a 13-year-old girl named Natalia Castaway also went missing, and then she was later found. But I can't seem to find anywhere that says, like, they're the same person. I assume they are, though, because from the exact same area, they look basically identical. I don't know. You see, there isn't many stories on women like this. Just little blurps in the news. Like, oh, by the way, this person's missing too. Anyway, what about Gabby Petito? It's frustrating. If you are a missing human being in this country, you should be treated equally with every other missing person in this country. Because they're people. They deserve to be found. They deserve to be safe. Whether you are a young white girl or a young Indigenous girl. If you have any information about Natalia Castaway, please contact the Alcester Police Department at 605-356-2679. You can also email missingpersons at state.sd.us. Let's make sure she's just as important as everyone else. Behind this boarded up door, one of the most horrific things you could do to a person would occur. Hello, true crimerers. This is another murdered and missing Indigenous case. Viewer discretion is advised. Pictured here was 22-year-old Savannah Graywind. She was described as a person who wanted to dedicate her life to helping others. She had actually just recently started working at a nursing home. Savannah was a member of the Spirit Lake Sioux tribe, and family to her was absolutely everything. And she was about to start her own family. She was dating a man by the name of Ashton Matheny. The two of them absolutely adored each other. And at the time of the story, they were expecting their first child. She was about 8 months pregnant. She was living with some family here in this apartment building on the basement level. She was on the verge of moving out to her own apartment with her boyfriend. Living in the same apartment building a couple of floors up was this couple here, William Hohen and Brooke Cruz. They had a very tumultuous relationship. Both of them had kids from other partners. None of them were allowed to see any of their kids. There was domestic abuse situations going on between the two of them. At one point, William was ordered to not go anywhere near Brooke, but they just kept getting back together. At one point, Brooke lied about being pregnant to William, and then when he found out, he was like, "You better give me a baby." You know, basically, or else. On August 19th, 2017, Savannah would be asked by Brooke if she could come upstairs and try on a dress. Brooke and Savannah, they really didn't know each other at all, just really more in passing. But Savannah, being the very helpful person she was, agreed. She went up to the apartment, and then she was never seen again. Her family would obviously question Brooke, like, "Hey, you were the last one to see her. Where is she?" She's like, I don't know, she left. So the family reported her missing. Now, the police, they did go to Brooke's apartment. They searched it twice. They said they found nothing. Several days later, the body of Savannah Graywind would be found floating here in this river, and her baby had been cut out. Someone tipped off police that Brooke and William, they had a newborn baby at home. So they went back to the apartment to inspect it. Lo and behold, they found the baby. By the way, the first two searches, the baby was there. William just had the baby under a blanket. Police never noticed. They also never noticed the fact that the first two times they were there, Savannah Graywind's body was in a closet. Brooke would reveal that she lured Savannah up to the apartment. An argument allegedly broke out. Brooke then pushed Savannah, who struck her head on a sink and fell unconscious. Brooke then took a knife and she decided to slash into Savannah's stomach. She fully cut her stomach open and removed the baby from her belly. And Savannah was alive the entire time. William got home and saw what Brooke had done and saw that Savannah was still alive. So he took a rope and he strangled Savannah until she was dead. He then shoved her in a closet in their bathroom and just went about their day. Then, of course, police came over, they searched the apartment twice, and somehow did not notice a human body in a closet or that a baby was just thrown under a sheet. They then hollowed out a dresser, put Savannah's body in it, and then loaded that dresser into their truck, and then dumped it all into this river. And at some point, Savannah's body fell out of the dresser because the dresser itself has never been found. So the murderous couple was then arrested and charged with the murder as well as kidnapping. Both of them were convicted, and Brooke was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, in terms of William being the one to physically end Savannah's life with the rope, they only had Brooke's word to go on that. So in reality, he was just charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, as well as a couple other smaller charges, and he was originally sentenced to life in prison without parole. But the North Dakota Supreme Court would overturn that, and he was then resentenced to 20 years in prison. As for the baby, she is alive and she is well. They named her Hazley Joe, and she was in really good health. Savannah's boyfriend and the father of the baby, Ashton, he was able to get full custody of the baby, where they are both members of the Spirit Lake Sioux tribe. A horrific story, but at least there is some positive outcome. An anonymous man would call police and tell them the Jack family are buried at the south end of the ranch, and then he hung up. Hello, true crimerers. This is another murdered or missing Indigenous case, and it is the case of the Jack family. Viewer discretion is advised. The Jack family was from Prince George in British Columbia, Canada. It consisted of 26-year-old parents, Ronald and Doreen, and their two children, 9-year-old Russell and 4-year-old Ryan. On August 1st, 1989, Ronnie Jack would go into the First Leader pub, just to have a drink. Due to some back issues, Ronnie did not have a job for the past several months. The family was struggling financially, they didn't have a car, and Ronnie was talking about his family struggles while here at the pub, and that is when he met a stranger. This is a composite drawing of that stranger. This stranger would come talk to Ronnie and say, hey, I have a job opportunity not only for you, but also your wife at a nearby logging camp. He even said, you can bring your kids and stay there because we have a daycare center. Ronnie told the man, well, I don't have a car, so I don't know how we're going to get there. And he said, no worries, go pack your things up, come back here with your family, and I'll drive you out to the camp. At 11:16 p.m. on August 1st, 1989, Ronnie would call his parents and say, hey, we're going to be out of town for the next few weeks because I was just offered a job. And then on August 2nd, 1989, at approximately 1:21 a.m., the Jack family was seen leaving their home, which is pictured here. They had gotten into the pickup truck of a stranger, and then the truck drove off. And then the Jack family was never seen or heard from again. The family was reported missing on August 25th, 1989, and police really had nothing to go on. They have the description of the man, but they had no name. They really had nothing about this guy. On January 28th, 1996, at 8:33 a.m., local police would get a call that lasted no more than 10 seconds. A man said, the Jack family are buried at the south end of the ranch. And that was it. Police had no idea what ranch. Police were able to go to several ranches in the area and with cadaver dogs and whatnot, but they've never picked up on anything. And this man has never been identified. No one has ever come forward to say who he is. He has never come forward to say, yeah, I was talking to the family and, give a story. Obviously, foul play had to have been involved. This is what the Jack family would look like today, if still alive, but that is highly unlikely. There had never been a case like this in Canada, and there has never been one since. What did they do with the Jack family? Hello, true crimerers. It is time for another murdered and missing Indigenous persons story. Well, this is actually going to be 6 stories. Viewer discretion is advised, even though I have very few words to speak. Hopefully you'll understand why I sound frustrated. So this is the only image that I could find of Diane Lynn Medicine Horse. She was from Crow Agency, Montana. She was last seen on the front yard of her uncle's home in Montana on September 28th, 1981. The story goes, she dropped her father off at home, then she drove away, and then no one saw her again. No one even heard a word from her, ever again. She allegedly had issues with drugs and alcohol, so her family did not report her missing immediately. It would be about a month later, on October 23rd, when they reported her missing. And from there, that's it. That's all I have. There are no updates on this case. Not one. Not a single thing. Next up, well, I can't find an image of her. Her name is Eleanor Trujillo. She was a 37-year-old woman from Yakima, Washington. This is the only thing posted about her case. She went missing on February 1st, 1996. And this is according to a list of missing people. That's it. Next up, again, no picture, Babette Crystal Green. She was a 26-year-old member of the Warm Spring tribe in Oregon. She was last seen alive in October of 1986. About 7 or 8 months later, skeletal remains were found in Wapato. But then it wouldn't be until 1989 when they finally got around to doing the dental work to realize that it was the remains of Babette Green. Her cause of death just says homicide. That is it. Nothing else. Next up, Angela Marie Heath. Again, no image. On April 5th, 2019, in Wapato, Washington, Angela was struck and killed by a hit-and-run driver. That's it. That's literally it. Next up, Barbara Celestine. Again, no image. The 44-year-old woman was found deceased on September 5th, 2005. Again, this is in Wapato, Washington. She died of blunt force trauma. End of story, that's it. Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. This is the only image I have of the final victim that I will be talking about today. Clydell Alice Sampson. She was from Klickitat, Washington, and all her story says is that the 25-year-old woman's skeletal remains were found. And this was in December of 1986. She was killed by 2 shotgun blasts and was reported missing 2 years prior. No update since. If only they were paler. She went out to some bars with some friends, and then she was never seen alive again. Hello, true crimerers. This is another case of a missing or murdered Indigenous woman. And it is the case of Monica Bercier Wicker. Viewer discretion is advised. Monica grew up on the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Reservation in Belcourt, North Dakota. This is her in her school days. She would go on to marry and have children, and then eventually that marriage would end up ending, and then she would move to South Dakota. She had a daughter, Tanya, in her first marriage. Between the 2 marriages, Monica had 3 children. This is her daughter, Tanya, and then this is her youngest son. I don't have a photo of the 3rd child. Monica was a very sociable person. She loved going out and hanging out with friends. Her husband at the time of this case was very opposite. He preferred to stay in and watch television and, have a beer or whatever at home, which they both said that kind of worked out for them. On April 7th, 1993, Monica would go out with some friends. Her husband would drop her off at a bar to meet her friends. And throughout the evening, they would kind of go from bar to bar. And the very last place they went to was a bar called The Body Shop. And this was in Aberdeen, South Dakota. So she was with 2 friends that she knew very well. And then there was a 3rd person involved that she had never met before. And apparently the friend she was with didn't really know him that well either. After they left the Body Shop bar, the 2 friends went on their own, and Monica apparently decided to go with the 3rd individual who she did not know. And then that was it. she was never seen again. A kind of crazy aspect of this case is that she was not reported missing until about 2.5 weeks later. The sheriff's department said there was a reason for this, but they're not revealing that reason. And then about 6 weeks after she disappeared, they found her. Monica was found floating in the James River, severely decomposed. The decomposition was so bad that they could not determine her cause of death. However, her death is labeled as a homicide. And it gets even trickier to talk about from here because there was no public information released about any suspects. They said they've had plenty of suspects, they've interviewed plenty of people, they do have a main person of interest, but they do not have the evidence to charge anyone. But who those people are is unclear. Obviously, I have to assume it's the individual she left the bar with, but all of the delays in the reporting of her missing, the finding of her body, it really tarnished the investigation as a whole. But, had they been searching for her several weeks sooner, her body may not have been as badly decomposed. They could have found out her cause of death. They could have checked camera footage, like CCTV footage of all the places she was. But like all of that footage, especially back in the early 90s, would have been erased and recorded over, after a certain amount of time. But again, nothing has been really made public. The suspects' names have never been dropped out there, and I don't really have much more to say, because this appears to be like a really closed off investigation. And that's an investigative tactic that a lot of law enforcement uses, because the less information they put out there publicly, they know that once they have their actual killer, they'll say something that only the killer would know, and not because someone said it in the news. But it's been almost 30 years since she was murdered. Since then, her mother and father have passed away. Her daughter, Tanya, who now has her own family, is still fighting for justice for her mother. There is a $10,000 reward being offered for any information that would lead to the arrest of a suspect. If you have any information about her case, please contact the Browns County Sheriff's Office, and you can reach them at this number here. The slightest, smallest detail could break the whole thing wide open. So maybe you can help solve her murder. Hello, true crimerers. This will be another case of a murdered or missing Indigenous woman. The case of Cheryl Lynn Jacques. Viewer discretion is advised. Cheryl was a Native American woman who had a young daughter named Lindsay, and this was her ex-husband. Now, her ex-husband lived in Pennsylvania at the time of this story, as did Lindsay, her daughter. She lived with him at the time. Cheryl was living in Stillwell in Oklahoma, and in 1999 she was living there with her boyfriend, whose name I don't know. But by all accounts, it was not a very good relationship. As a matter of fact, it is believed that Cheryl was abused by this man. At the same time, she was also involved with a crowd that was not considered exactly the greatest. In fact, it's believed she was likely involved in some sort of drug situation. On June 23rd, 1999, she would go to her mother's house in Oklahoma City, and she went there to borrow some money. For what? It's not really clear. One thing that was clear, however, is that it appeared that Cheryl had been just beaten senseless. She had these massive, gashes down her back. Her mother and sister described it as the skin on her back was flapped over, and that she definitely needed stitches. She said that she got into an argument with her boyfriend and that she had fallen backwards into a glass tabletop. Her mother and sister weren't exactly believing that story, but they said, "We got to take you to the hospital. We got to get that stitched up." And she said, No, I'll be fine. She got the money from her mother. She left their house, and from then, she was never physically seen again. She was heard from, however, a few weeks later. On July 3rd, 1999, her mother would receive a phone call from her. Now, that phone call came from Fort Smith, Arkansas. When she talked to her mother, she said, "I'll be back soon to Oklahoma City to repay the money that I borrowed from you," but she never got home. And then at that point, no one had ever heard from her again. Cheryl was reported missing, obviously, but there has been virtually no leads, no genuine witnesses. Police can't even find her Datsun pickup truck. Like, that hasn't been abandoned anywhere. Or if it was really, really well hidden or destroyed. Now, foul play is absolutely suspected at this point. Police have said that we firmly believe that she is dead, but they have nothing to go on. I can only assume the boyfriend has been ruled out, but I don't know. And to this day, she is still missing. Hello, true crimerers. This is a case of another murdered or missing Indigenous woman, and it is the case of Khadijah Britton. Viewer discretion is advised. Khadijah was a 23-year-old living in Covello, California. She was a member of the Wailaki Round Valley Indian tribe. In high school, she was a straight-A 4.0 student. She was a fantastic basketball player, and she was a beloved member of the community. She had recently been dating this man, 40-year-old Neji Fallis, and he is a problem person. He is a repeat drug offender. He is also someone who has committed domestic abuse on more than one occasion. And as we speak right now, he is currently in federal prison on gun charges. Towards the end of January 2018, Khadijah tried to leave him. Or she did technically leave him. Right around that same time, he beat the crap out of her. Not just with his fists, but he also took a hammer to her. She then had gone to tribal authorities to initially report that issue, but then, likely out of fear, she decided to say, never mind. Again, it is extremely difficult for domestic abuse victims to leave their abuser or to get away from them. The number of Indigenous women who experience domestic abuse, the number is astronomical. It's disgusting how often it happens to them. And unfortunately, it appears that Khadijah was not able to get away. On February 8th, 2018, she was at a friend's house. This is not that house. This is the house that Khadijah lived in. When all of a sudden, her ex-boyfriend / abuser, Neji Fallis, came to that house armed with a gun. He then forced her out of the home and into his car. He then sped away, and Khadijah has never been seen since. Now, what I don't understand here is witnesses saw this happen, but police are saying they need more witnesses to say what happened in order to press charges against this man. What do they need? He abused her, he dragged her out of the house with a gun, and now she's gone. Like, I understand there's no body, they haven't found her yet, but the man is literally in prison on federal gun charges. Like, they say they've put thousands of hours into this investigation. Okay, what? Ding, 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 here's your guy. I get it, maybe there's not any physical evidence, I understand. Her family just wants to know where he put her, and they want her unknown killer to pay. Hello, true crimerers. This is a case of another murdered or missing Indigenous woman. And it is the case of Lisa Marie Young. Viewer discretion is advised. Lisa was a 21-year-old Indigenous woman living in Nanaimo, which is in British Columbia, Canada. On the night of June 30th, 2002, one of her friends, Dallas, was celebrating his birthday. Shortly after 11 p.m. that night, she would say goodbye to her parents, leave her home, and then she would meet her friends at the Jungle nightclub, which is now called Evolve. Sometime around 2:30 in the morning, they would leave the nightclub and go to a house party. Now, Lisa and her friends would hitch a ride from someone they did not know at the time. His name was Chris Adair, and he drove a red Jaguar, which is similar to this. So from the nightclub, they would drive down to a house party, which is located there. They then spent some time at that house party, and then there was another party a little down the road. Now, from that location, sometime after 3 o'clock in the morning, Lisa said she was hungry and she wanted to go get some food. Lisa was a vegan, so she had particular places that she wanted to go to. So this new friend of theirs, Chris, offered to take her in his car to go get some food. Then, around 4:30 in the morning, so about an hour and a half later, Lisa would text her friend Dallas. She told them that they were now parked in a driveway here on Bowen Road. The text said, and I quote, "Dallas, I don't know what's going on. This guy won't bring me back. We're sitting on a driveway on Bowen Road, and he won't bring me back." End quote. And after that, Lisa would vanish. She has never been seen from again. She has never been heard from again. There has been absolutely no sign of her. Now, when she was reported missing, the RCMP allegedly was very slow to get this case going. They thought, she's just drunk, she's probably hungover, she'll be fine, blah, blah, blah. There were even rumors that given her Indigenous status, that maybe they pushed her case to the side. Again, that's just allegedly. Police were able to track down the vehicle. They searched it thoroughly, and they found no evidence that was indicative of any crime happening. They also questioned Chris Adair, but he's never been placed under arrest. He's never been charged with anything. Police do believe that she met with foul play that night, and she is no longer alive. Of course, there's always hope that she is, but we're talking 20 years later with no sign of her. The odds aren't good. As recently as 2021, several people from that night have finally come forward because they were afraid to come forward way back then. But even still, there's been no update. If you have information, contact the Nanaimo RCMP, and that number is right there. The life of a beautiful mother of two would be cut tragically short on the Tuesday Reserve in Canada, and to this day, her murder is unsolved. Hello, true crimerers. This is another case of a murdered or missing Indigenous woman. Viewer discretion is advised. This was 33-year-old Sabrina Rosette, and she was a part of the Tialescox First Nation, and they are located on the Tuesday Reserve in British Columbia, Canada. She grew up in a very loving home. She had an older sister named Liz, and her father, Alfred Jack, absolutely adored her. And Sabrina was absolutely a provider. Every day she was out hunting and fishing. She also volunteered with firefighting and flood control. She was one tough mama. She was literally a mama. She had 2 young boys, and their names are Drayson and Devlin. She also had nieces that she absolutely loved, and she was always out there teaching them stuff like how to hunt, how to fish. I mean, she just genuinely seemed like an all-around great person. And everyone had nothing but good things to say about her, and they just loved being around her. This is her, by the way, in the middle of this picture. On June 8th, 2019, the small community living in the Tuesday Reserve would be shocked and devastated. News had spread that Sabrina Rosette had been murdered. And June 9th also happened to be her older sister Liz's birthday. Liz would say, "I actually saw her that morning. She drove by my house. She was in a car with a family friend of ours." Liz said they drove by her house, and Sabrina smiled and waved, and that was the last time she ever saw her alive. Her father, Alfred Jack, had rushed home, and his home's at the top of a hill, and he could actually see most of the community from there. And at one of the community members' houses, he saw nothing but flashing lights. It happened around 6 p.m. that evening in the driveway of another community member's residence. Initially, it was reported that a woman was seriously injured, but she would die at the scene. She had been stabbed in the rib, at least one time. To the family's knowledge, the murder weapon has never been found. The family friend she was driving around with, he was arrested right there at the scene, but then he was released within that same day. The frustrating thing is, there's not much more for me to say. They have released virtually no information on this case. Even the family members don't have any information on this case. Everyone in law enforcement appears to be just very hush-hush about it. We know she was murdered, but by who? Are there any suspects? Where's the murder weapon? You can't even say that she, fell onto her own knife, because the knife is gone, so someone did it to her. The RCMP, though, they are still investigating this, and they're desperate for any witnesses to come forward. Her boys deserve to know what happened. Hello, true crimerers. This is another Indigenous case. Viewer discretion is advised. For this story, we are going to the Wind River Indian Reservation, which is located in the state of Wyoming. It is one of the largest reservations in the country. The reservation is actually over 2 million acres. Pictured here was a member of the Northern Arapaho, 30-year-old Jocelyn Watt. And at the time of this story, she was dating her boyfriend, 30-year-old Rudy Perez. They were a very happy couple, very much in love. And eventually, wedding bells were going to ring. But sadly, that would not actually get to happen. Just down this road on January 5th, 2019, the bodies of Jocelyn Watt and Rudy Perez would be found shot to death inside their home. Now, the police force on the reservation there is actually really small, so they had to enlist the help of the FBI. But even still, they could not seem to solve this case. No suspects really stood out. So Jocelyn's family, led by her sister, whose name was Jade Wagon, and their mother, Nicole Wagon, they rallied, they protested, and did everything they could to get their voices heard. Jade Wagon, whose tribe name was Cedar Tree Stands Alone, well, tragedy would also strike her. While she was one of the biggest voices to get justice for her sister, she too would become another statistic. On January 2nd, 2020, her mother Nicole will report her missing. This poor woman had just lost her other daughter brutally, and now all of a sudden, her other daughter goes missing. On January 21st, 2020, the body of Jade Wagon would be discovered on the reservation. At first, police would label this an accidental death, something to do with hypothermia, but Nicole felt something was off. She just did not believe that Jade just died accidentally. Now, it turns out her suspicion would be correct. I don't have much information on this, but very recently there was a warrant put out for someone's arrest in response to the death of Jade Wagon. No one has been arrested, but it does confirm that someone was involved in her death. Police and FBI were also still working diligently on the murders of Jocelyn and Rudy. Finally, in December of 2021, they got a break. A teenager would come forward to police to say exactly what happened. He and 3 of his other teenage friends, they got drunk one night. Then they got some methamphetamines, if you catch my drift. They went driving around town and then randomly broke into their home. 2 of them entered the home, the other 2 stayed in the car. For some reason, they were both shot dead. All 4 were charged, but their trials obviously have not started yet. But they're getting their justice, finally. A young Indigenous mother in California would last be seen here near this bridge, but she's never been seen since. Hello, true crimerers. This is another missing or murdered Indigenous woman case. Viewer discretion is advised. Pictured here was 33-year-old Emily Reisling. She was a member of the Hupa tribe, which is in Northern California. She was a University of Oregon graduate. She had a young daughter. She was a very skilled tribal dancer. For a while, everything seemed to be going great. But then, shortly before her case starts, some very erratic behavior would begin. Now, she appeared to be battling some mental health issues. She had actually been found wandering some of the nearby reservations completely nude. And then she was actually arrested for arson. She set a small fire in a cemetery. She was released pending charges, and her family was kind of upset by this because they thought, okay, maybe she'll finally get the mental health help she needs with police. But there just really wasn't any mental health services in the area. Mental health facilities are described as like being very scarce in the area. Now, in October of 2021, Emily was in the Yurok Reservation, and it was at a place called End of the Road. It's described as like when the pavement breaks off and becomes just a wooded area. She was last spotted in this exact area crossing a bridge, and then she was just gone. There are some issues with jurisdiction because she went missing on the Yurok Reservation, but she is from the Hupa Reservation. But from what I also understand, the local police outside of the reservations, they can also assist or deem this like a cold case if it ever gets to that. Ever since her disappearance, the Yurok Reservation has declared a state of emergency because this is now an increasing issue. That basically this has become an epidemic. In the past 18 months during this time, at least 5 women have gone missing or were found dead. And sadly, this is an issue all over the country. Here in the States, missing and murdered Indigenous people, especially women, their cases aren't always tracked. They're not always reported. The authorities don't always make it official. So the exact number is unknown. But 80% of Indigenous people in this country have experienced some form of violence. And it's an issue that does not get any attention, ever. Emily's family just wants to know where she is. They did a 3-day massive search back in May of this year, but it came up with nothing. If you have any information about her whereabouts, please contact this number. Hello, true crimerers. This is another case of a murdered or missing Indigenous person. Viewer discretion is advised. In July of 2015, 3 members of the Shane family who lived on the Crow Reservation were driving down the highway near the reservation. 51-year-old Jason, 47-year-old Tana, and their 26-year-old daughter Jorah. Jason and Tana actually had 7 children in total. They had 5 boys and 2 girls. They were described as very, very good people who would help literally anyone. Good Samaritans, if you will, and that is exactly the people they were on this fateful day in July of 2015. They were driving on Pryor Gap Road, and this apparently is on the western edge of the Crow Reservation in Montana. As they were driving, they saw a car that was pulled over and a motorist who looked like he needed help. Jason and Tana, doing what they would normally do as good people, they pulled over to the side of the road in order to help this man who was having trouble with his car. All 3 members of the Shane family got out of their vehicle and they began to walk towards the Ford vehicle. It was white. And all of a sudden, the stranded motorist just gets out of his car and he points a .22 caliber rifle at them. The assailant, he said he demanded money. He was demanding money from them, and they said, "We don't have any money on us." He then, pointing the gun at all 3 of them, he started to lead them away from both of the cars. That is when he just opened fire and he shot and killed Jason Shane right then and there. And then Tana Shane, she began to speak to her daughter Jorah in a Native American language, basically telling her, run, get out of here, run away right now. And that's exactly what Jorah started to do when she then heard more gunfire and her mother screamed. And she didn't look back, she said, because she was scared. And then Jorah felt blood coming down her side, and then she felt a gunshot wound directly in her back, and then she fell to the ground. She managed to kind of turn around, and she saw that the shooter, the assailant, got into the family's vehicle and then sped away. Jorah was able to scream for help, and thankfully there was I think it's like a church right down the road. And I think they heard the gunshots, so they were already on their way, but then they heard her scream, so they were bolting over there. And unfortunately, both Jason and Tana, they were both deceased. But Jorah would thankfully survive. Jorah was able to give them a description of the shooter, and also obviously a description of their vehicle since it was theirs. And they had information from the shooter's inside his vehicle. And with all of this, I think it's not too soon afterwards, in Meeteese, Wyoming, I don't know if I said that right, they would find the man who shot the family. He was 18-year-old Jesus Deniz. They got a photo of him, they showed that photo to Jorah, and she confirmed with 100% certainty that he was the man who shot the family. He was also in possession of their car. He was then charged with 2 counts of murder. When questioned, he said he shot at them because Jorah laughed or smiled at him. And that I guess he was impatient and he was tired of waiting for someone to come help him. He would go to trial, and he was convicted without a shadow of a doubt, and he received life in prison without parole. A young Indigenous man calls his mother for a little bit of money to get home, and then he's never seen alive again. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Russell Turcotte. Viewer discretion is advised. This is the last known photo of the 19-year-old young man who lived in Wolf Point, Montana. His family are natives, and his mother would describe him as an absolute free spirit. Whatever he could put his mind to do, he would do it. He was not afraid to do or try anything new. In July of 2002, Russell and a friend of his would go to the Rainbow Family Gathering in Michigan. I am honestly not too sure on what this event is, but according to Russell's friends, they had a great time. Now, his friend had to leave about a day early, so Russell stayed behind and thought, I'll just hitch my way home. He actually met a group of people there that he would call friends, and he hitched a ride with them to Fargo, North Dakota. On July 12th, 2002, the friends went their separate way, and Russell would be left to hitchhike. He managed to get himself to Grand Forks, North Dakota, where he found himself at a truck stop. And that was the Simonson Travel Center. At 11 p.m. on July 12, 2002, he would call his mother from this truck stop and ask to get some money. And this was just so he could get a bus and get home sooner, because apparently there was also a wedding going on in the family that he wanted to attend. And his mother did just that. She wired him some money. But the money was never picked up. That phone call was the last time anyone ever heard from him again. On July 14th, 2002, his mother calls police and wanted to report him missing, but they laughed her away, saying, he's 19, they do this. 19-year-olds also get murdered too, you know. I cannot stand that shit. 4 months later, no thanks to the police, he was found. The 19-year-old man was found naked and bludgeoned to death. And this was near Devil's Lake, which I guess is in North Dakota, and it's about 100 miles away from where he was last seen. Again, police just very nonchalant about the whole thing. They just couldn't seem to care less. That was made more evident when Drew Shedin went missing. I've covered her case before. The media went crazy over her disappearance. The police were super active. Russell was lucky to get a couple paragraphs in a newspaper. It was all hands on deck for Drew, and Russell was just, who? Police speculated that maybe Joseph Duncan here did it. He was a killer of young people. But again, they're like, Russell's family has no answers. It's been 20 years. Hello, true crimerers. This is another missing or murdered Indigenous woman case. Viewer discretion is advised. Pictured here was 13-year-old Lori Lee Jealous of him, and she lived in the Porcupine, South Dakota area. She lived specifically on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. On September 1st, 1989, she would leave her home, and it was presumed that she was on her way to Rapid City, South Dakota. But she never came home. As a matter of fact, since that day, no one has ever seen or heard from her again. Not even a whisper. And that's it. That's her case. That's all the information I have. No local news articles. No news coverage. This is the only photo of her I could find. Next up, Rosalia Lou Tuli So Happy. I can't even find a photo of her. So you get a stock photo, basically. On New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1988, she was last seen in the Brownstown, Washington area, and she just went missing. Apparently, I don't know. I can't find any information. All I know is that she was last seen on New Year's Eve, 1988, and then on March 13th, 1989, she was found. She was found in Atenham Ridge, Washington, I guess a little north of Brownstown. She was in a ravine, she was partially clothed, and she had been strangled to death. And that's it. That's all I got for you. No news coverage that I can find. No articles. Basically, her life came down to a 3-sentence story. A little, a blurb. This was 28-year-old Karen Louise John Lee Wallahy, and she lived in the Hara, Washington area. On November 7th, 1987, she was last seen at the Lazy R Tavern, which doesn't exist anymore, I guess, and then never seen again. Oh, she was wearing a Levi's jacket, a pink t-shirt, white sneakers, and she had pink barrettes in her hair. That's it. That's her story. Again, her life came down to a couple sentences. Imagine a society, if you will, just not caring. These are human beings. Daughters, nieces, aunts, mothers. But these 3 lives came down to a total of about, 9-10 sentences. By the way, Gabby Petito, I'm sure you remember her. May she rest in peace, of course. Well, her story is already getting a movie. Imagine that.